Hello, David. How are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm doing so much better now that I'm speaking with you, Mr. Acclaimed writer, author extraordinaire. And I want to know, first and foremost, David Sklar, I want to know, where were you born and when did you realize that you had a knack for writing?
I was born in Philadelphia, but moved shortly thereafter to Detroit. Um, and my parents, well, when I was a kid, my parents were like, "Oh, we'll go to the same public schools everyone goes to. If they're good enough for every other kid, they're good enough for us." And then my mother took a teaching job in a Detroit public school and finally quickly realized that they weren't good enough for the kids who were already there. And so rather than put my sibling and me in the public schools, they created a neighborhood school, and then from there went together with other people to create alternative schools on the Kozol model. I don't know if that means anything, but it wasn't sustainable, and ultimately they got real jobs and put us into Roper City and Country School in the Detroit suburbs, which was based on the Waldorf model. And my homeroom teacher, when I first started there, woman by the name of Kristen Casey, uh, just immediately started reading the things that I brought in for the writing assignments and loved my stories and gushed about the stories. And I was in a new place and thought, this will be my identity.
I love that, David. I also just love, by the way, it just seems like you come from a very creative, thinking outside the box family. So the fact that you had writing to express these probably outside the box emotions, and it usually does take that one teacher during childhood that validates your talent, that really unlocks the genius. And I'm curious, David, for you as a kid, was there a certain genre that of storytelling that you were most attracted to versus now? Is there a certain genre that you would say is more your sweet spot over another?
I think as a child, I read a lot of fantasy. I was a big fan of Ursula Le Guin, Lloyd Alexander. I was also a big fan of Jack London when I discovered his work. But yeah, fantasy was most of what I read as a kid, and that seems to be what I gravitate to as a fiction writer, and sometimes as a poet as well. That a lot of my poetry is based either on fantasy or on myths and legends.
I love that. I really love that. And I want to deep dive into those myths and legends only because a little maybe right or left of that, I've always been obsessed with folklore,
Hmm.
always. And as a director and a creator, I just love the idea of taking folklore and kind of messing with it a little bit or putting it on its head for a 21st century audience. I'm curious how ideas come to you, David. Is it are you inspired by what's around you? Are you inspired by dreams? Are you inspired by childhood memories? Or is it everything and anything?
There's a lot of everything and anything there. Dreams are a big part of it. My novella Shadow of the Antlered Bird is no longer available, but it started as writing down a dream, and then that became the first chapter of a long story about these two characters who spoke on a rooftop, and then what happened after the dream, after the meeting on the rooftop. Um, I've written some poetry from dreams off the top of my head. I don't know.
Are you one that remembers dreams, or are you one that if you have a dream and you like it, you have to write it down right away?
Usually it has to be written down right away or I forget it. Sometimes I remember them, sometimes not.
Now, obviously, during this time, David, it's been tough for all humans, but especially artists. And I'm curious to know if there were any ideas that you found truly blossomed during the pandemic, and maybe some ideas of things that we haven't seen yet that you can maybe give us, I don't know, a little sneak peek about?
Well, the one idea that's blossomed not so much just during the pandemic, but in like I guess it's been a tough time for several years now. I don't think I can say how many years without getting very political. But yeah, for a few years now, I've been unable to really focus the way I used to, and I created this thing called the poetry crisis line.
Well, you took it right out of my next question. I want you to go into the impetus for the poetry crisis line and yeah, explain to the people who haven't done the research what it is exactly.
Well, you want me to start with the origins or what it is?
Whatever you want.
All right. Well, so
Let's start from the beginning, a very good place to start.
Several years ago, a friend of mine was trying to put together a manuscript, and she wrote on social media, "I'm having a poetry crisis." And my wife, who used to be a crisis line counselor, used to be a social worker, has a master's in counseling, said, "I wonder what a poetry crisis line would be." I think a poetry emergency hotline was the term that we were using originally, what it would be like. And so I started these poetry crisis line scripts, where I think the first one was Hamlet. And he calls in and says, "To be or not to be," and the poetry crisis line counselor says, "Yes, sir, are you having an existential crisis then?" And he goes on, and I think in the script format, it's set up as she's trying to figure out where to route his call. There was a shorter version of it that I eventually did as a cartoon. I started doing them. They were just something I did on Facebook for several years, and then they were something that I did as scripts on a website. And then about a year in, I was like, well, once a month I'm going to do a cartoon, and I'll either draw them or hire artists, but I can't afford to hire artists. So I'm mostly drawing them myself. And I did a cartoon that was, I believe the first one was the Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner. And a couple of weeks later, I was doing costume ideas for poets. So yeah, I wish I had it prepped so that I could just flash these things on the screen.
No, do not worry. Well, I want to remind the audience, for more on everything that David is talking about, we're going to put all the links right below this video so that they can deep dive into it even more.
Okay, yeah. So then I just started doing the cartoons more often than I intended to, and within a month of my thinking, oh, I'll do a cartoon every month, they were a cartoon twice a week. Right now it's down to once a week because I needed a little bit of a break. I want to be able to do other projects, come up with other ideas, but yeah, currently it's every Tuesday. It used to be every Monday and Thursday. Now it's every Tuesday, and it may change again in the future, but for now it's every Tuesday. I will put a cartoon up on the Poetry Crisis line.
Well, I love it very much. I've gotten to deep dive into it. I love the fact that, when you have an idea, you just kind of go after it, David. And I think for artists out there who tend to maybe overthink about the how, but I think you're a perfect example of the person that just does the thing and puts it out there unapologetically. And, look, I could talk to you forever, but I want to let our audience know for more on the amazing, amazing, amazing David Sklar. You could read more about him right below this video. David, thank you so much for your time today, and I'm happy that we're connected now.
All right, thank you. It was great talking with you.